Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Monday night in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. We're going to start off with some satellite data this evening, and I'm watching the position and strength of this very large low-pressure system that over the weekend delivered a lot of snow into California. You can actually see the snow quite well under the cloud sheet. As I kind of rock back and forth today, the stuff that doesn't move is the snow. So it's here in central Oregon, it's in the Columbia Basin, and certainly in the Klamath Mountains and along the Sierra Nevada, where again we saw over 4 feet of snow and very, very strong winds here. Now our attention is going to turn to the snow this is going to deliver to the midsection of the country and eventually into New England. But before I get into that, I want to do a quick analysis on the west and show you a very useful tool. Okay, so first map we're going to look at here is now going to be the total accumulated precipitation for the last 7 days from the MRMS data. So it was doing a great job capturing the flow of these systems coming down out of the Gulf of Alaska while the ridge was farther west and just setting up slowly over California, delivering in some places over 6+ inches of liquid equivalent into the mountains and coastal regions. We had late last week, the snow that came out of South Dakota and hit parts of Iowa, Wisconsin through with rain south. And then as we discussed around that big subtropical ridge, this is where we saw most of our heavy rain from the Red River Valley of the south through the Tennessee Valley. There was snow this past weekend over parts of New York and the interior of New England as well. Some places picked up 3 to 8 inches of snow out of that one system that skirted through the Great Lakes this past weekend. But what I want to do is I'm going to draw this back to a discussion fully about snow by showing you this map. We're going to look at it a lot this winter. And what's most important is what this map looks like by the time we get to March. It's an accumulated snowfall departure map. And I'm going to adjust my color bar, I think, pretty soon just to represent the data a bit better here. But I'd like to make the case that these systems coming through the west over the last month and a half have really put western U.S. snowpack in a great position for early winter. In fact, it's technically not even winter yet if you base it off of the solstice. And we need this to continue for the next 4+ months to continue to see drought relief across the west. Now, we're going to talk about this map in other places around the country soon, but I just want to focus on the west here. And I'm going to show you a great resource, and it's going to be linked down below in the video notes. It's from NRCS, and it looks at the snow water equivalent. It's in percent, comparing the to 1991 to 2020 data set. So you can look at it and see where you stand compared to this time on average. Now, if we just kind of blankly look at it, we see that there's a few places in the north that are a bit behind. For example, the Olympic Mountains. But we're still, even these colors represent 100 to 110% of normal right in through here. Even the central Rockies are doing okay, but it's the southern Rockies that are behind right now in that 30 to 50% range. But if you come over to Oregon, which suffered through incredible drought this last year, the Blue Mountains, the Cascades, the northern rim of the Snake River Valley, we've got 150 to 180% here. And then down into the Sierra Nevada, you'll notice that some of these are up between 200 and 300% of normal for this time of year. Now remember, it's early. We need this to just last all the way through the rest of winter. We do not want a repeat of last year where the jet stream shut off coming into the west. And December was great last year, but January, February, March was just a no-show, just no moisture coming into California. It was all in Oregon, really northern Oregon into Washington, Idaho. So we got to keep an eye out for that and talk about that because we just keep coming back to a question. This is the latest drought monitor. It'll update on Thursday morning. We just want to know what this is going to look like by the time we get into April. Now, my latest projection based on long-range forecasts suggests that we're going to go from about 80% of the land area in drought now probably down to about 60%. The strongholds will be right in through the plains. I think that's going to be the place that takes the longest to clear that out. But spring rains can undo all of winter's scent. That's just kind of a saying I have. So we'll watch out for that carefully. In the next few days, we're going to see major changes in the drought monitor here and the east. It's going to be right back here where the rain shadows continue to cause problems that we're going to see the lack of a change in the drought monitor. So this is what we've got going on. In fact, let's get an update of this. Let's see, there we go, 6:40 p.m. I'm recording a little later tonight. My software crashed on me with the first record, so we're getting a second round here. But this is it. We got blizzard warnings in red, surrounded by winter storm warnings. This is an ice storm warning coming out of Minnesota into parts of South Dakota, and it's going to be strong winds in through here. Notice that Iowa's actually now put out wind advisories. Same thing down south into New Mexico. Now, from here, when we watched this particular system emerge, I was keeping a very close eye as to how far to the west we could get this moisture. We were watching some storms. Here they are, a couple of storm systems in western Kansas. Now, they need a lot of rain in this area. These storms are packing quite a bit of a punch too. As you just see as I rock back and forth here, this is late this afternoon. The storms are firing. Unfortunately, they're moving quickly, but they're putting down moisture for some. It's not widespread coverage, but storms did blow up in western Kansas where we desperately need the moisture. It's going to build down this line here. Now, it's kind of fun. When I do this, I rock back and forth quickly. You can see the stationary things and then, of course, the weather system's moving. And most of those bright echoes you see from the stationary objects are wind farms, like this big one north of Lubbock near Petersburg. And then you can also see them around Dodge City, for example. But there's also one other thing. Do you see this wedge that's missing here? That's because where the radar is located, there's a peak to a mountain next to it, and it blocks the view on this side. I'll be honest, I could look at this stuff all day long and keep talking about it. But out ahead of this, some showers, and I'm going to show you tonight a model I don't show you that often. It's the high-resolution rapid refresh model, and the reason why is because for this evening, it was probably the best initialized of the short-term high-resolution models. So you had the storms here, the scattered showers out ahead of it. So through tonight, we're going to have to watch out for some stronger nocturnal storms that, overnight tonight, around midnight to 2 or 3 in the morning, right in through this area from Texas through Oklahoma, Kansas, into Nebraska. That's an area we're going to watch out for some stronger storms, and then scattered out ahead of it. Now, the main upper level front lines up over the dry line and the cold front, and this all presses east through tomorrow morning. And as we play forward, we're going to watch for tomorrow afternoon and evening, the severe weather threat being in eastern Oklahoma, eastern Texas to Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. And tomorrow night, the storms pass right over the river about 8 o'clock. At least that's the current projection of when they're going to be closest, and then start to clear their way off to the east. So that's just looking at the southern side of this particular storm system. I want to talk a bit about the severe weather side of it. So let's go to the website here. This is what we've currently got from today's day 1 convective outlook. So again, tonight, this is the area we're going to watch for these storms. As we then work into tomorrow, Storm Prediction Center just continues to identify a large area here on the 13th with the greatest risk of having these very strong storms rip through this area. And then as we get into Wednesday, it's going to be mostly down here along the Gulf Coast as the front finally gets off to the east coast of the United States. This low is going to take 4 more days, Tuesday through Friday and even into Saturday, to finally get off to the east. So it's going to be a very slow mover. Now, I know a lot of you would like to see the latest snowfall totals, so I'm just going to go right to it and use the models to kind of predict this. So this is from the 12Z European model. I feel that it's been quite consistent. I'm going to show you the ensemble probabilities next, but from northern Nebraska through South Dakota into the Red River Valley, and then again in northern Minnesota toward Duluth and northern Wisconsin, we're looking at a very good chance of seeing 6 to 18 inches of snow with even higher amounts right in through here and here. So that's what we've got from the European model. I'm going to compare it to the ensembles in a second, but remember, this storm system eventually finishes in New England. And so if we look at this would be Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, from central Pennsylvania through New York, and then of course with lake effect following this system, we could see some very heavy snowfall in these areas, and they're lining up quite well with the mountain chains as you kind of look here in parts of New England. So this is a very dynamic system taking a long time to cross the country. It's going to put down a lot of rain, severe weather to the south, and very heavy snow to the north, plus some ice. I'll come back to that in a second. But first, let me give you some probabilities. This is the probability of at least 3 inches of snow, so 90 to 100%. I mean, a big area here. This is the probability of 6 inches of snow over the next 10 days. That's a lot of area that's going to see very heavy snowfall. This is the probability of 12 inches of snow. So if you just want to think about this, that means there's 1 to 1.5 inches of liquid in the snow that's hitting the very dry parts of the northern plains. This is exactly what I want to see. This will help work hard on the drought scenario in the northern plains because that's moisture there. How soon it melts? Not anytime soon, but it will get into the soil at some point. I like it. Now you notice that the west not seeing big snowfall totals. I'll show you why that's going to happen in just a second, but let's keep going. That's the probability of 18 inches of snow, so 50 to 80% chance here, and also coming off of Lake Ontario, and shoot, why not? This is the chance of 2 feet. It looks like the best chance for that is right here in the arrowhead of Minnesota. Now, on the precip side of this, let's go back and look at the chance of finding out who's going to be dry. So less than 1/10 of an inch over the next 10 days. Notice fewer systems coming into the west. I'll show you that again in a second. Drier in the high and southern plains down here, where we keep seeing the dry slot open up and hitting this area. But if we flip over to who's going to be wet, this is the best chance of getting 1 inch of liquid equivalent over the next 10 days. So look at how much moisture is in that. This is the chance of getting 2 inches of liquid equivalent. That is like when that melts, that's like a 2-inch rain there. very wet from Louisiana through Mississippi toward Tennessee. And this is the chance of getting 4. So this is a lot of moisture locked up into this in this particular system. All right, from here, let's now go look at what the next 10 days shows us. We got 2 systems, one now, one early next week. The big one now takes us deer sweet time. The one early next week I'll show you in just a few seconds, but the heaviest rains are pretty far to the south. This will bring a lot of wet weather into here, and there's the effect of the rain shadow. But you notice that from British Columbia through the coast, the west coast here, very dry over the next 10 days. And we're in a minute going to cover why that is the case. From here, though, let me give you some total precipitation numbers from the European model. So I'm just going to play this out. Let's go out there 7 days. And once again, you see 1.5 to 2 inches of liquid here once that snow melts. Very wet weather from Louisiana up toward Tennessee. Very wet all around this. Could possibly be a little drier from parts of the Cotton Belt down here from Georgia into South Carolina and North Carolina once you get into the kind of the Piedmont area, but wet into New England as well. And because I like to compare the models, I just want to point out, and we're going to do this in more detail in a second, the European is a wetter model because it's a bit slower with the first system, and it's got more moisture in it than the GFS does. So that's why we see more of these colors representing a wetter European forecast versus the GFS, which is a U.S. model. Okay, why is it taking so long for the system to cross the country? It's because it's cut off. Actually, 3 separate lows by the 14th, the morning of the 14th. And this is the one that was over California on Saturday. It still has not moved out of the plains. So with a lot of north-south flow, meridional flow, with no big kicker coming through, these are going to take a long time to get east. Now this is opening up a pretty broad warm sector with some overrunning, which means we do have the threat for some ice out of this as well. And through the next 3 days, you can see parts of the upper Midwest getting into the Great Lakes states and over toward Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Virginia on the spine of the Appalachian Mountains. We've got a decent chance of picking up 1/10 of an inch of ice, so be very aware in those areas. We already have the ice storm warning out for this region. Okay, let's compare the models and see where this all goes. I'm going to pick it up on Tuesday, which is where the first model left off. As we play this forward, the low just continues to stall as it stacks up vertically. The front crosses the river at some point on Wednesday, sets us up with strong to severe storms south, but very heavy rain out ahead of this. The front then clears like Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana as we get into Thursday midday, but the wraparound on the back side of this just continues to put snow down from parts of Saskatchewan and Manitoba into the northern plains and upper Midwest. It's at this point as it moves over Pennsylvania. In fact, let me take you back one step. You see where the model's kicking out some risk of ice. See, it's in both models there in Pennsylvania, so please be careful if you're watching this. This kind of is, Lancaster County. This is an important area for seeing that much ice. As we play this forward into the weekend, both the models just put down quite a bit of snow, all elevation dependent in parts of New England as the front clears out. But we'll be dragging some rain through the East Coast here where that front leaves. But notice, on Friday, the low is still stacked here. There's a little kicker that's going to try to come around the base of it and push the snow through New England. But you notice this entire time I didn't talk at all about the Northwest, because we may have a system next Sunday coming through there, but this is nothing like the systems we've been seeing. Now, past next Sunday, as this weak low moves into the Northwest, the European model in the last 2 runs has been aggressive with developing a low in the central United States. And it keeps producing that low coming out of the Red River Valley of the South through the Mid-South and into like Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, and Indiana. See it right there. It could be some more snow on the northern side. The latest GFS wants to do that. The previous runs did not. So now you see it's a little bit later, but it wants to do this as well. And I'm kind of curious about this because this is right out there about the solstice. And at that particular point, the GFS is dumping a lot more snow in my home state of Illinois. So I'm watching it carefully. I get kind of interested in this stuff. But the European model much quicker to advance this out. All right, that second system, we're going to have to wait until later in the week to have a full handle on what it's going to do. It's in the ensembles. It's in both models now, but the details will be lacking until we get a better look at that wave. What I can tell you is this. Through the next 10 days, the flow is coming off of China, zips over Japan, and breaks up here. You have a piece that goes into a large ridge here, a trough to the south of it, and the flow comes into the west like that. Now, this is not a good setup for Western United States precipitation. It's the wrong trajectory. We need more of a westerly component to this. And instead, this dives into deep troughs that then run up the East Coast. And we got to talk about what that means in terms of precipitation. But what this will tell me is that a lot of cold air will be tucked away inside this trough coming to the east with this pattern. And I expect it to be quite more active here than being advertised. Now, the European model is a little bit drier than normal in California due to that flow. It just recently brought up better week 2 precipitation in parts of the Pacific Northwest. But I will be watching out for systems coming out of the panhandles, systems coming out of the Arctic region, systems that come out of the Gulf Coast. We call these Miller Type A storms, or even systems that maybe start right here where the Ohio and Mississippi come together and give us a Miller Type B storm. I think that those are possibilities with this pattern as it's going to evolve here. Watch this carefully with me. Expect a lot of change in the week 2 forecast, which again gets us out to 1 day past Christmas. All right. From here, let's talk temperature before we get into the longer range. Now, tomorrow, Tuesday's high temperatures are hot down here in the lower Mississippi River Valley. And that, again, is what's going to destabilize the atmosphere. The front tries to clear through the midsection of the country on Wednesday, but it takes a while. And even though you see warmer than normal conditions here, this is going to be snow flying in this. Really wet, heavy snowflakes coming out of this. As we go into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, that's when the real Arctic outbreak starts to take over in the day 5 through 10 time period, from Alaska through British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, down through Montana, the Northern Plains. This whole region's looking at a 5-day average temperature departure from normal of 20 degrees. And that continues. Doesn't matter if I show you the GFS or the European, they're both saying the same thing. It continues all the way out there to day 15 in the flow, which is approaching, of course, Christmas and beyond. So very cold end of this month signaled by the models. It was about 5 days later than we projected earlier in December as to when this was going to be here. And we kind of need to talk a little bit about what's controlling this pattern and how long something like this might last. But can I make a point here before I do that? You're looking at the 10-day forecast for temperature anomalies across the world. And while we're seeing this cold air finally coming out of the Canadian prairie into the northern plains and all the way to the east coast, okay, we're going to see colder conditions across France, Germany, Poland, Scandinavia, the UK, where there was a big snow event late this weekend. We see it's colder than normal through much of Siberia, a lot of big snowpack there. Much of eastern China, very, very cold compared to normal. And as a result, these are 3 major population centers that are seeing high energy demand. It's quite cold in Australia as well. And we're looking there at some more precipitation over places that have been quite wet this spring. Now, as I stretch this out into the longer range, I'm going to ask your permission for something, okay? And the permission I'm going to ask is for you to let me be wrong with this. And I'm going to show you why I think there's going to be a problem. This was released on Friday. It's the new CPC outlook for December 24 to January 6th. I buy it. I look at this and go, yep, I think this is going to happen. And I'm going to explain to you why I think it's going to happen and look something like this. But the new European model has a different story. It's got almost the exact opposite pattern, especially for Texas through the, this part of the Mid-South getting into the Tennessee and Ohio Valley. Same thing for California, dry, very dry. Now, I don't think this is going to verify. And I'm going to show you something. This is December 20 to January 20. The previous run, which was initialized wetter, was the opposite. I mean, look at that. That's the same time period, just the previous long-range run. So the new one came in drier, probably because of initialization problems. And I do not think that they're handling the ridge in the Gulf of Alaska properly. So let me make a case for what I think is going to happen, and we can kind of watch it together, see if I'm right or if I'm wrong. So this is what I'm keeping an eye on. When we look out there at the high latitude blocking, so this is like the Arctic Oscillation, which is big high pressure over the North Pole, the North Atlantic Oscillation, which is a big ridge that goes over Greenland into the North Atlantic, or the Pacific North American pattern, which is the Western United States trough ridge pattern. We see that the models are giving us good evidence of what they might do. For example, this is the P&A. But it wants to keep things a bit positive compared to normal. But look at the spread. There's a lack over the next 45 days of good signal of what this is going to do beyond about the 20th and 21st of the month. The high latitude blocking, okay? They're suggesting that the high pressure fades, but the spread is enormous in the forecast. Same thing with the North Atlantic Oscillation. So I'm saying right now that we can't really trust these long-range forecasts because of large spread, uncertainty in what the La Niña is going to do, uncertainty in the MJO, uncertainty in the North Pacific ridging and North Atlantic ridging. And here's what I'm going to put together for you, okay? The tropical connection is going to come here. The trade winds are screaming again right now. This might be the last big surge of La Niña. We'll still get strong trade winds for a little while longer, but I think we're about to see the biggest push of it reaching its peak here in late December. It's 1.1 degrees Celsius below normal here. That's a strong La Niña. Now, look at this And remember that we've got strong trades here, westerly wind bursts there, and there's still a lot of warm water here in what's called the negative phase of the PDO. So we need to watch the tropical teleconnection, La Niña MJO, the North Pacific teleconnection, that's the negative phase of the PDO, and the blocking that could happen here over the Arctic or over the North Atlantic. I think it's going to be a combination of all of them. Now, I'm going to come to the tropics first because today's latest forecast of those trade winds, holy smoke, look at this. This is very, very fast. This is a big easterly wind burst and meeting a big westerly wind burst. And guess where they meet? Just draw a line down the middle, right over MJO phase 6. Now, that means that the end of December going into January is when we're going to see this affecting the jet stream pattern. And I want to show you what it's done historically. MJO phase 6 is common in January when there's a La Niña. And it suggests that the jet stream is south and screaming off of Japan and China, but hits this large high latitude block. It's one there, here, and here. So what this ends up doing is it focuses the jet stream winds here where they stop, and then it invigorates them there. And they tend to dive over the plains and come out around a weak trough feature of the East Coast. Now that particular pattern is only problematic if you're in southern half of California in the southwest. It's the wrong setup to deliver moisture there. But otherwise, this is active across the United States. Now, that's if it's an MJO phase 6. What if it starts to shift around like it would to the next highest level, which would MJO phase 7? This is where we really have to have a quick discussion. Negative NAO, big block over Russia. Strong jet stream winds coming out, stopping because of this ridge. Now, as it stands, this would deliver flow that did that. And boy, that would be cold and very active in the eastern 2/3 of the country. But if you take this ridge and shove it just a bit farther to the west, now the flow comes over like this and dives into the west, which is why if that occurs and we see more of this MJO phase 7 flavor, I tend to favor this forecast. Wetter for California through the northwest, active Ohio River Valley storm track, very little area that's going to be drier than normal, even the plains. Whoops, sorry about that. Overall, that's a very positive message. And I might be confirming my own biases and looking for this, but it's what I found. So that's why I asked you to let me be wrong with this. Okay, from here, though, I want to show you this. Remember I said there's that warm water between Hawaii and the Aleutian Islands back over toward Japan, the negative PDO. In January, if the PDO is negative, there tends to be ridging that's over those Aleutian Islands. Not on the west coast, but here. That allows the troughs to dive into the west and run up over the top of a southeastern ridge. And everybody's in business if that sets up. Negative PDO winters are cold. They tend to produce cold in the northern and western and central United States. Tend to be more mild over the southeast, but boy, do they crank up the jet and really get it screaming across the country. So let's watch it. That's what I'm seeing right now. Okay, we'll get new long-range updates from Columbia University, hopefully later this week, if not early next week, and I'll put that in the next report. South America. There were weekend rains that came right into the midsection of Argentina, moved north, and even some rain today over this very dry section of Buenos Aires. But overall, the long-standing drought here meant that even though some places picked up 20 to 30 millimeters of rain, it was not enough to overcome the long-standing drought problems. I just pulled this up here. I went over toward Cordoba, which is right here, and I wanted to see how much of a dent did that rain that came through. So they got about 20 millimeters in Pilar, which is near Cordoba. And, it's a little step over the longer-term drought issues that are going on here. And the problem is the 10-day forecast is very unforgiving to Argentina, Uruguay, Rio Grande do Sul, Paraguay. Very dry in these areas, while Brazil sees a lot of precipitation moving forward. This means that the Brazilian crop will likely meet some of those very high expectations, because if there's drought issues at south, I think Brazil, based on some analysis I've read and listened to, could carry some of the deficits in Argentina, especially with soybeans. But Argentina is going to continue to see problems as we just push this farther down the road with drought risk there. This may not be something that we see break until we get fully into the new year. And even at that, we've got to see a major change in the flow pattern across the equatorial Pacific. So that's what I got for South America. Wet north, very dry south. We'll wrap it up. Thanks for your attention tonight. I will talk to you again very soon. Thanks.